Want to hear about the process of genetic recombination, how it relates to DNA repair, and how it connects to the first episode of Star Trek Discovery? Tune in right now. Hello, my name is Mohammed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant for the Star Trek universe. I'm super excited to talk with you today about the process of genetic recombination and the repair of DNA breaks following exposure to radiation. Now, I'm going to discuss this in the context of the pilot episode of Star Trek Discovery, but this is something of huge importance when we think about astronauts today, and especially as we start looking at interplanetary or interstellar travel. So let's dive right in. Again, I'm focusing on the pilot episode of Star Trek Discovery called, quote, the Vulcan Hello. The USS Shenzhou sees something strange near a pair of binary stars. Commander Burnham, the first officer, offers to fly out in a spacesuit to look, but Commander Saru notes that the radiation will make her DNA unravel within a few minutes. Well, she flies out there anyway, she gets hurt, and suffers serious radiation exposure. When she wakes up, she leaves the medical bay prematurely, and the doctor, trying to stop her, says, "Wait, the recombination process is nowhere near finished, and do you understand the effect of genetic unspooling?" There's a lot to unpack here. It's really cool. I'm going to start with a quick refresher on some basic genetics that you may have seen in some of my other videos. So let's start with DNA. DNA is the hereditary material in basically all life on the planet. It has 4 types of building blocks to it that we abbreviate with the letters A, C, G, and T. And DNA is assembled into these large packages called chromosomes. And we humans have 23 pairs of such chromosomes. So let's focus just on one pair of these chromosomes. Again, everyone inherits one copy of each chromosome from their dad and one copy from their mom. So if you get this blue one from your dad and this red one from your mom, you would have one of each. Now, despite how it's shown in pictures, DNA is not really this long thread hanging out in the cell, but it's instead spooled or packed around proteins called histones in each cell. Although it's looped around these histones, segments can get unspooled and the histone can make room or go away, so the DNA is accessible at times when other proteins need access to it. Now, in one of my earlier videos, I talked briefly about a process called recombination. But let me briefly mention it again here. Although you may have one copy of this blue chromosome and one copy of a red chromosome from your parents, you may not pass on a full blue or a full red chromosome to your kids. It's likely instead that in the process of making your sperm or eggs, these chromosomes will swap large fragments like this. So now it's part blue and part red. This swap is what's called genetic recombination. And one of these new combinations is then what you'll pass on to your kids through your eggs or your sperm. Now you may be wondering, where along this chromosome does this recombination event happen? Well, in humans and in a lot of other animals, the location is not random. There's a particular protein called PRDM9 that looks for a specific sequence of DNA letters. By the way, this sequence here, the ends are spots where any DNA letter will work. And when this protein finds this specific sequence of DNA letters, it then makes the DNA break right there. Interestingly, this particular letter sequence that PRDM9 will target differs just a little bit between ethnic groups. But the point is this PRDM9 protein guides the location of these DNA breaks, and the repair process is what makes the red piece stick to the blue piece. So again, recombination happens as a result of a DNA break and then repairing the DNA. If our DNA was left broken, the cell would very likely die or severely malfunction. But I want to focus on this, DNA breaks and repair, since that's what this Discovery episode is actually talking about. It's not actually talking about the kind of recombination I just went over, but instead it's referring to a different kind of recombination that's sometimes called mitotic recombination. Mitotic recombination happens not just when you're making gametes like sperm or eggs, but in regular cells all the time. So DNA breaks will just happen because of some cell error or when something like radiation hits the cell. And again, these breaks are bad. Even one break can sometimes cause the cell to die. So not surprisingly, our cells have evolved machinery that tries to stick DNA back together after a break. And it's mostly accurate, but unfortunately it's not always perfect. Sometimes one or more of these DNA letters gets lost in the process. Or sometimes the wrong ends may even get stuck together. So back to this episode, Commander Michael Burnham was out in space without good protection. There were concerns with her DNA unraveling, and there was a recombination process afterwards that was supposed to be helping her. So let's break this down. First, Commander Burnham was blasted with both solar particles from those binary stars, but also cosmic rays that are prevalent throughout our galaxy. And some of the radiation from these is what's called, quote, ionizing radiation, in that it's very hard to protect against. This ionizing radiation can literally pass through metal, knocking the electrons out of the metal or other things in its way, and making dangerous secondary particles from those. That's really bad news. In Commander Burnham's cells, multiple problems can come from this radiation exposure, but I'm going to focus on two. One is that parts of her DNA will get broken, and second, some of her histone proteins, which DNA winds around, may get damaged. The first of those is what requires some sort of DNA repair process, hence this quote-unquote recombination. Yay! The second is what may cause the DNA unspooling, and there we need new undamaged histones to be made. If either of those doesn't happen, then there's big trouble for Ms. Burnham, leading to cell death or cancerous growths or other cell malfunctions. But this episode highlighted three cool genetics concepts. First, the importance of DNA repair. Second, the way in which DNA is packaged inside cells. And third, the potential threat that radiation in space poses to both of those. So kudos to the writers. I literally screamed the first time I watched this episode and heard them mention recombination and genetic unspooling. Had you heard of these processes before? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for tuning into BioTrekkie Explains. See you next time.